He opens the door, and the dog screams. It isn't a bark, not the sharp command of a trained canine, but something deeper, something that seems to tear through the quiet like a warning that doesn't belong to this world. Ethan Cole freezes with his hand still wrapped around the cold brass handle, the porch light above him flickering just enough to make shadows shift across the wooden floorboards beneath his boots. The night air carries a faint metallic scent, mixed with the dry chill of early winter, and somewhere in the distance a loose gutter taps rhythmically against the side of the house, like a slow ticking clock counting down to something unseen. Rex has never done this before. Not in 6 years. Not in training. Not in combat zones half a world away. Not even in the worst storms where thunder rolled like artillery across the sky. The German shepherd stands rigid behind him, muscles tight beneath his sable coat, amber eyes locked not on Ethan, but on the space beyond the door, as if staring through it, as if seeing something that shouldn't be there. Easy, Ethan murmurs under his breath, though the word feels hollow the moment it leaves his mouth. Rex doesn't ease. Instead, the dog steps forward and presses against Ethan's leg, not aggressively, not forcefully, but with a quiet insistence that feels almost human. A plea. Ethan exhales slowly, his breath fogging faintly in the cold, and for a second, just a second, his mind drifts somewhere he doesn't like to go. A different door. A different night. The memory is quick but sharp, the sound of boots on gravel, the low murmur of voices, and then the kind of silence that comes right before everything changes. He tightens his grip on the handle without realizing it. It's nothing, he says, more to himself than to the dog. But Rex shifts again, this time more urgently, his nose dipping low, not toward the door, but toward the narrow gap where the wood meets the threshold. His ears tilt forward, catching something Ethan cannot hear. The world seems to narrow in that moment, the distant sounds fading until all that remains is the faint hum of the porch light and the steady rhythm of Rex's breathing. Inhale, exhale, controlled, focused, waiting. Ethan follows the dog's gaze, his own eyes adjusting to the dim light, tracing the grain of the wood, the faint cracks along the edge, the subtle imperfections no one would notice unless they were looking for them. And then he sees it. Not clearly at first, just a line, thin as fishing wire, stretched low and almost invisible unless the light catches it at exactly the right angle. His heartbeat slows instead of quickens, the way it always does when instinct finally aligns with reality. Rex lets out a softer sound now, no longer a scream, but a low, steady whine that hums with quiet urgency. Ethan doesn't move the handle. He doesn't open the door. He simply stands there, the weight of the moment settling around him, realizing that whatever waits on the other side isn't the danger. It's what happens if he takes one more step forward. The line should not be there. Ethan lowers his hand slowly, as if even the smallest movement might disturb something fragile and unseen, and the cold metal of the handle slips from his grip without a sound. Rex does not relax. The dog remains fixed in place, head low, eyes sharp, tracking that nearly invisible thread stretched across the threshold like a whisper pulled too tight. Ethan shifts his weight back 1 inch, then another, the wooden boards beneath his boots creaking softly, and even that small sound feels too loud for the silence wrapped around the house. He crouches slightly, not fully, just enough to bring his line of sight closer to the floor, and the porch light flickers again, catching the filament for half a second longer this time. It glints. Not natural. Not random. Intentional. Rex exhales through his nose, a slow, controlled breath, then glances up at Ethan for the briefest moment, as if checking whether the message has been received. It has. Ethan's jaw tightens, but his voice stays low, steady, almost calm. Good catch, he whispers, the words barely more than air. The dog's ears twitch at the tone, not the words, and his body remains poised, waiting for the next decision. Ethan leans slightly to the side, careful not to cross the line, and studies the base of the doorframe, the hinges, the narrow gap beneath. The scent in the air becomes clearer now that he is paying attention. Not just cold wood and dust, something sharper. Manufactured. He does not name it. He does not need to. His training fills in the blanks without asking permission. For a moment, a familiar memory brushes against the edge of his thoughts again, but this time he does not push it away. He lets it sit there, quiet and steady, A reminder that hesitation is not weakness when it keeps you breathing. Rex shifts his front paw slightly, placing it just behind Ethan's heel, anchoring himself there like a silent partner who refuses to let him step forward alone. Ethan notices. He always notices. His hand hovers near his pocket, not reaching for anything yet, just resting there, grounding himself in the present. The night presses in around them, still and watchful, and even the distant tapping sound has stopped, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Ethan straightens slowly, eyes never leaving the door, and takes one careful step back, then another, creating distance inch by inch. Rex mirrors him perfectly, never breaking focus, never turning away. When they are finally clear of the threshold, Ethan exhales fully for the first time, a quiet release that carries no panic, only certainty. He glances down at Rex, and in that brief exchange there is no confusion, no question, only understanding. Whatever waits on the other side of that door was meant to be triggered by someone who did not listen. Ethan reaches into his pocket now, pulling out his phone with deliberate calm, his thumb hovering over the screen for a second before making the call. His voice, when it comes, is steady, measured, and free of urgency, because urgency is for people who have already made a mistake. "This is Ethan Cole," he says quietly. "I need a unit out here. I have something that does not feel right." Rex finally lets out a soft, low sound, not fear, not warning anymore, but something closer to relief, and he steps closer to Ethan's side, pressing lightly against his leg as if to confirm what neither of them needs spoken. They are still here. And sometimes, that is the miracle. The minutes stretch without sound, but time does not feel empty. It feels heavy, like the air itself is aware of what almost happened and refuses to move forward too quickly. Ethan stands a few steps back from the porch, phone still in his hand, the faint glow of the screen casting a pale light across his knuckles, while Rex remains at his side, body aligned with Ethan's stance, eyes never leaving the door, as if the danger might change shape if left unwatched. A distant engine hum finally breaks the silence, low at first, then slowly growing as headlights appear at the far end of the gravel road, cutting through the darkness in steady beams. Ethan does not wave them down. He does not step forward. He simply waits, one hand resting lightly against Rex's neck, feeling the warmth of the dog's fur beneath his fingers, grounding himself in something real and alive. The vehicle rolls to a stop about 20 yards away, engine idling, doors opening with controlled movements, and two figures step out, their posture calm, practiced, their presence quiet in a way that tells Ethan everything he needs to know. Professionals. They approach without rushing, boots crunching softly against gravel, eyes already scanning the house, the porch, the door. One of them nods once toward Ethan, a silent acknowledgement, and then follows his gaze down to the threshold. It does not take long. The thin line catches the light again, and the man's expression shifts just slightly, not into fear, but into focus sharpened by experience. "You did not open it," he says, voice low, almost conversational. Ethan shakes his head once. "He would not let me." He does not need to point. Rex has already understood. The second man kneels carefully at a distance, studying angles, distances, the subtle clues that most people would never see. And for a moment the world narrows again into small details, quiet breaths, deliberate movements. No one rushes. No one raises their voice. Time moves differently here, measured not in seconds, but in decisions that cannot be undone. Rex finally shifts his weight, just slightly, leaning into Ethan's leg, and Ethan lets his hand rest more firmly against the dog's shoulder, not as a command, not as reassurance, but as recognition. The bond between them does not need words tonight. It already proved itself. After what feels like a long while, one of the men stands and gives a small nod, the kind that carries meaning without explanation. "You were right to stop," he says. Ethan exhales again, slower this time, the tension leaving his body not all at once, but in layers, like something carefully unwrapped. He looks down at Rex, really looks this time, at the steady eyes, the quiet strength, the unwavering presence that stood between him and something he never fully had to face. Rex meets his gaze without hesitation, calm now, grounded, as if the storm that never came has already passed. Ethan's voice is softer when he speaks again, almost to himself, but the dog hears it anyway. You felt it before I did. Rex does not move, but something in his posture shifts, something small and almost invisible, like a breath released after being held too long. The porch light flickers once more, then steadies, casting a warm, constant glow over the doorway that remains closed, untouched, and behind them. The night resumes its quiet rhythm, as if nothing had happened at all, except for the two souls who now understand that sometimes the difference between walking forward and staying alive is not strength, not training, but the quiet decision to listen when something loyal refuses to let you take the next step. The house stays quiet long after the men finish their careful work, the door still closed, the thin line no longer glinting under the porch light, and whatever waited behind it now reduced to something understood, contained, and no longer a question hanging in the air. The vehicle's engine hum fades as they prepare to leave, their movements as controlled as when they arrived. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words, just a final exchange of nods that carries respect without needing explanation. Ethan remains where he is, boots planted on the cool wooden boards, shoulders finally lowering as the tension releases its last hold on him. Rex shifts closer, pressing his side gently against Ethan's leg, not out of fear, not out of uncertainty, but out of something quieter, something steady, like a reminder that the moment has passed and they are still standing in it together. The porch light above them stops flickering now, settling into a soft, constant glow that spills across the threshold and out into the night, illuminating the grain of the wood, the edges of the steps, the small details that had been invisible just an hour ago. Ethan looks at the door again, not with suspicion this time, but with a kind of distant understanding, as if it has become less of an object and more of a memory waiting to be carried forward. He inhales slowly, the cold air filling his lungs, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and distant pine, and for the first time since he stepped onto the porch, his breathing finds a natural rhythm again. Rex finally lifts his gaze from the doorway and looks up at Ethan, ears relaxed now, eyes softer, the alert intensity replaced by a calm that feels earned rather than given. Ethan meets that look and holds it for a moment longer than necessary, because something in him knows that this was not just instinct, not just training, not just coincidence. There was a choice made here, a silent decision drawn from loyalty that does not hesitate, that does not second-guess, that simply acts when it matters most. Ethan lowers himself slowly onto the top step, the wood creaking beneath his weight, and Rex follows without needing to be told, settling beside him with a quiet exhale that carries the last of the tension out into the open air. For a while, neither of them moves. The night resumes its natural sounds, a distant breeze brushing through trees, the faint rustle of leaves, the kind of ordinary quiet that feels different after it has almost been taken away. Ethan reaches down, his hand resting on Rex's head, fingers moving slowly through the thick fur, not as a command, not even as reassurance, but as gratitude given in the only language that matters between them. "You saw it," he says softly, the words steady, certain, and free of doubt. Rex does not respond with movement or sound, but he does not need to. The answer is already there, in the way he stays close, in the way he remains present, in the way he chose not to step aside when it would have been easier to obey. Ethan's gaze drifts outward, beyond the porch, beyond the quiet road, toward the darkness that now feels less threatening and more like something vast and watchful. And for a brief moment, he allows himself to sit in that stillness without needing to understand everything that led them here. Some things are not meant to be explained. Some things are only meant to be recognized in the moment they happen, and carried forward as quiet proof that not all warnings come with words, and not all miracles arrive in ways we expect. But sometimes, they stand beside you on four steady legs, refusing to let. You walk into a step you cannot take back. The night deepens, but it no longer feels heavy, no longer presses against Ethan's chest the way it did before, and the quiet that settles around the house carries a different weight now. Something calmer, something earned through a moment that could have gone another way. The porch light hums softly above them, steady and warm, casting long shadows that stretch across the yard, and Ethan remains seated on the top step, his posture relaxed in a way that has not come easily in a long time. Rex rests beside him, close enough that their shoulders touch, the dog's breathing slow and even. Each exhale a quiet reminder that the tension has passed and the world, for now, is still holding together exactly as it should. Ethan's hand lingers on Rex's neck, fingers moving absent-mindedly through the thick fur, tracing the familiar lines that have been there through every chapter of his life, through places and moments he rarely speaks about, through nights that felt longer than this one and mornings that did not always promise anything better. He looks out across the darkened road, the gravel now empty, the headlights long gone, and for a moment, he lets himself imagine what would have happened if things had unfolded differently, if he had ignored that hesitation, if he had dismissed the warning that did not come in words. The thought does not stay long. He lets it pass, like a breath that is not meant to be held. Rex shifts slightly, lifting his head just enough to look up at Ethan again, his amber eyes reflecting the porch light in a soft glow, calm and present, as if nothing extraordinary has happened at all. And maybe, in the way dogs understand the world, nothing has. There was a moment. There was a choice. And now there is simply the quiet after. Ethan studies him for a second longer, then lets out a faint, almost amused breath, the kind that carries more meaning than it shows. "You did your job," he says quietly, though the words feel too small for what they hold. Rex's ears twitch at the sound of Ethan's voice, but he does not move, does not seek praise, does not expect anything in return. That has never been what this was about. Ethan nods slightly, as if acknowledging something, deeper than the moment itself, then leans forward, resting his forearms on his knees, eyes drifting back to the closed door behind them. It looks ordinary now. Just wood, hinges, a handle that no longer holds the same weight it did before. But Ethan knows better. Some doors are not just doors. Some moments are not just moments. And sometimes, the difference between the two is measured in inches and seconds, in the quiet refusal of a loyal companion who sees what you cannot. A light breeze moves through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and cold earth, brushing past them like a reminder that the world keeps turning, that life continues in ways both seen and unseen. Ethan straightens slowly, pushing himself up from the step, and Rex rises with him in one smooth motion, their movements still aligned without effort, without command. For a brief second, Ethan rests his hand against the side of Rex's face, thumb brushing gently along the fur just beneath his eye, a small gesture that carries everything he does not say out loud. "We are heading inside," he murmurs, voice steady, not hesitant anymore. But this time, when he turns toward the door, he does not reach for the handle right away. He pauses, just for a breath, just long enough to listen, not with his ears, but with something quieter, something learned in a single moment that will not leave him. Rex stands beside him, calm now, silent, no warning, no tension, only presence. And together, they wait that extra second, not out of fear, but out of respect for the unseen things that sometimes guide a step or stop it. And in that pause, there is no urgency, no doubt, only the quiet understanding that trust, once proven, is not questioned again. The pause lingers just long enough to matter, a single breath stretched into something deliberate, and Ethan stands there with his hand hovering inches from the door, not frozen, not afraid, but aware in a way he had not been before this night. Rex does not move, does not signal, does not warn, and that absence of reaction speaks just as clearly as everything that came before. The air feels different now, cleaner somehow, as if whatever tension once clung to the threshold has already been lifted and carried away into the dark beyond the yard. Ethan finally closes the distance, his fingers wrapping around the handle again. But this time there is no rush behind the motion, no assumption that the next step is simple or guaranteed. He turns it slowly, the mechanism inside the door giving a soft, familiar click, and for a brief second, the sound echoes louder than it should, like a memory trying to remind him of what almost was. The door opens inward with a quiet creak, revealing a dim interior washed in shadows and stillness, the faint outline of furniture just visible under the low glow of a distant lamp left on inside. Ethan does not step in immediately. He lets the space breathe first, lets the silence settle into something natural instead of something forced. Rex takes one cautious step forward, nose lifting slightly, drawing in the air, reading it in a way no human ever could, and after a moment, his posture softens, the last trace of alertness easing into calm acceptance. Only then does Ethan follow, crossing the threshold with a measured step that carries none of the weight it would have held before. The wooden floor inside is cool beneath his boots, the faint scent of the house familiar, grounded, untouched by anything that would raise concern. He closes the door behind them gently, the latch settling into place with a soft finality that feels more like closure than confinement. For a moment, they both stand there, just inside, the quiet wrapping around them like a blanket that has finally been returned after being taken away. Ethan exhales slowly, longer this time, the kind of breath that reaches deeper, that clears something lingering beneath the surface. Rex moves further into the room, paws silent against the floor, his body language relaxed now, tail low but steady, as if the purpose that drove him moments ago has already been fulfilled and set aside. Ethan watches him for a second, then allows himself a small, almost imperceptible nod, not as an order, not as approval, but as acknowledgement of something shared between them that does not need to be spoken again. He reaches over to the nearby table, flicking on a lamp, and warm light spills into the room, pushing back the shadows, revealing familiar shapes, familiar edges, everything exactly as it should be. Nothing out of place, nothing hidden, just a home that almost became something else. Rex circles once near the center of the room, then settles down, his body folding into a relaxed position, head resting low but eyes still open, watching Ethan with quiet attentiveness that never fully disappears. Ethan removes his jacket slowly, setting it over the back of a chair, his movements unhurried, grounded, each action returning him further to the present. He glances once more toward the door, now closed behind them, and there is no tension left in his gaze, only a quiet understanding that not every danger announces itself loudly, and not every warning comes in time unless something loyal stands close enough to give it. He steps closer to Rex and lowers himself to one knee, his hand resting again against the dog's shoulder, firm and steady, a silent thank you carried through touch rather than words. Rex leans slightly into it, just enough to acknowledge, just enough to complete the moment. And in that stillness, with the house quiet and the night continuing outside without interruption, Ethan realizes that sometimes survival does not feel like escape or victory. Sometimes it feels like this: a door opened carefully, a step taken with awareness, and a presence beside you that refuses to let you walk alone when it matters most. The house settles into a quiet rhythm that feels almost unfamiliar after everything that came before. The soft hum of the lamp, the faint creak of wood adjusting to the night air, the kind of small sounds that only exist when nothing is wrong. Ethan remains where he is for a moment longer, one knee still on the floor beside Rex, his hand resting against the dog's shoulder as if letting the contact anchor him to something steady and real. Rex does not move away. He stays there, calm, present, his breathing slow and even, but his eyes remain open, watching, always watching, as if the world has taught him that stillness does not mean absence of responsibility. Ethan studies him quietly, then shifts his weight and rises, moving across the room with a measured pace that carries no urgency, no tension, just a quiet awareness that lingers in every step. He moves toward the window and glances out, the darkness outside now softer, less imposing, the yard stretching out under the faint glow of distant streetlights, untouched, undisturbed, as if nothing at all had come close to changing it. But Ethan knows better. He always will. He rests his hand against the window frame, fingers brushing the cool glass, and for a brief second, he allows himself to replay the moment on the porch, not as fear, not as what could have been, but as something precise, something exact, a point in time where a single decision shifted everything that followed. Behind him, Rex shifts slightly, the soft sound of movement barely audible, and Ethan does not turn immediately. He already knows the dog is there. He always is. "You did not hesitate," Ethan says quietly, his voice carrying through the room without force, without weight, just a simple acknowledgement spoken into the stillness. Rex steps closer, his paws silent, stopping a few feet behind Ethan, not seeking attention, not demanding recognition, just existing in that same quiet space, sharing it without question. Ethan exhales slowly, then turns, meeting the dog's gaze again, And there is something different in his expression now, something settled, something clearer than it was before. Not surprise, not disbelief, understanding. He walks back across the room and lowers himself into the chair near the lamp, the worn fabric creasing under his weight, the familiar comfort of the space grounding him further with each passing second. Rex follows, circling once before lying down nearby, positioning himself in that instinctive place where he can see both Ethan and the door at the same time, a habit formed long ago, never abandoned, never forgotten. Ethan notices that too. He always notices. His eyes drift toward the door for a moment, then back to Rex, and a faint, almost invisible smile touches the corner of his mouth, not from amusement, but from recognition of something deeper, something constant. Still watching, he murmurs softly. Rex does not respond, but his ears shift slightly, catching the tone, not the words, and that is enough. The room remains quiet, wrapped in that calm that comes only after something has been narrowly avoided, and Ethan leans back slightly in the chair, his shoulders finally releasing the last of their tension. He does not need to check the door again. He does not need to question what already happened. The truth of it sits quietly in the space between him and the dog, unspoken but undeniable. Outside, the night continues without interruption, the world moving forward as it always does. But inside, something has changed in a way that cannot be undone. Not fear, not caution, something steadier, something earned. Ethan reaches down, letting his hand rest once more on Rex's back, fingers pressing lightly into the thick fur, and for a moment, neither of them moves. There is no command, no expectation, no need for anything beyond what is already there. Just a man, a dog, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the strongest bond is not proven in noise or action, but in a single moment where one refuses to let the other walk into something they cannot see, and in that refusal, gives them another chance to simply sit, breathe, and exist in a world that almost slipped away without warning. The quiet does not break, but it changes, shifting into something deeper, something that settles into the walls and the spaces between breaths, and Ethan sits there with his hand resting on Rex's back, feeling the steady rise and fall beneath his palm like a rhythm that does not need to be questioned. Time moves, but slowly, stretching out in a way that makes every second feel deliberate, as if the night itself is allowing them space to understand what just happened without rushing them forward. Ethan leans back slightly in the chair, eyes drifting toward the ceiling for a moment, tracing the faint lines where light meets shadow, and his thoughts move not in sharp edges, but in quiet reflections that come and go without forcing themselves to stay. He has lived through moments louder than this, harsher than this, moments that demanded reaction, demanded action, demanded survival in ways that left no room for pause. But this feels different. This was quiet. This was a warning that came before anything had to be endured. Rex shifts again, not to move away, but to adjust, settling more comfortably at Ethan's feet, his body angled just enough to maintain that instinctive line of sight toward the door, a habit that no longer feels like tension, but like purpose resting at ease. Ethan notices the position, the subtle alignment, and a small understanding settles in his chest, something simple but heavy in its meaning. Some instincts do not turn off. They just soften. He reaches down again, fingers brushing lightly along Rex's back, and this time the motion is slower, more deliberate, as if acknowledging something that words cannot fully carry. You stayed, he says quietly, not as a question, not as a surprise, but as a recognition of what was already proven. Rex's ears flick slightly at the sound of his voice, and for a brief moment, the dog lifts his head, looking at Ethan with that same steady gaze, calm and present, as if the answer has always been obvious. Ethan lets out a slow breath, the kind that carries no weight behind it, and his shoulders settle further into the chair, the last trace of tension dissolving into something quieter, something steadier. Outside, a faint breeze brushes against the house, barely audible, a soft movement that passes without drawing attention, and the world continues its quiet rhythm without interruption. Ethan's gaze drifts again toward the door, not with concern, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet respect, as if acknowledging that some thresholds hold more than just space between inside and outside. He does not rise. He does not check it again. He does not need to. The moment has already given him everything it was meant to give. Rex lowers his head once more, resting it against the floor, his body fully at ease now, but his presence still firm, still grounded, still there in the way that matters most. Ethan leans forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped, and for a moment, he simply sits in the silence, letting it exist without needing to fill it. There is no urgency left, no unanswered question pressing against his thoughts, just a quiet understanding that sometimes the most important moments do not arrive with noise or chaos, but with a single hesitation, a single step not taken, a single presence that refuses to move aside. And in that stillness, Ethan realizes something that will stay with him long after this night fades into memory. That trust is not built in the moments where everything goes right, but in the ones where something unseen almost goes wrong, and someone, or something, stands close enough to stop it before it ever begins. The silence deepens into something almost sacred, the kind that does not demand attention, but quietly holds everything in place, and Ethan remains seated, his breathing slow, steady, matching the calm rhythm that Rex has already settled into beside him. The lamp casts a warm pool of light across the room, softening every edge, turning shadows into something gentle rather than unknown. And for the first time that night, the house feels entirely like his again. Not a place of uncertainty, not a threshold between what is safe and what is not, just a place where he can exist without needing to anticipate the next moment. Rex does not move, but he is not asleep. His eyes remain half open, aware without tension, present without strain, the kind of awareness that comes not from fear, but from a quiet commitment that does not turn off when the danger passes. Ethan watches him for a moment, studying the stillness, the discipline, the way the dog remains ready without appearing restless, and something in that steadiness settles deeper within him. He leans forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped, and lets his gaze drift downward, not focusing on anything specific, just allowing his thoughts to move in a way that feels unforced. There is no rush to understand everything. There is no need to dissect the moment into pieces that can be explained. Some things do not need explanation. Some things simply need to be recognized for what they are. Rex shifts his head slightly, just enough to meet Ethan's gaze again, and in that brief connection, there is no question, no doubt, only a quiet acknowledgement that something important has already been shared and does not need to be repeated. Ethan exhales slowly, then nods once, almost imperceptibly, as if confirming something to himself rather than to the dog. "You trusted it," he says softly, the words carrying more weight than they sound. Rex does not react beyond a slight flick of his ears, but that is enough. It always has been. Outside, the wind moves again, brushing lightly against the walls, a soft reminder that the world continues beyond this room, beyond this moment, and Ethan lets that thought settle without resistance. He leans back into the chair, shoulders relaxed, posture no longer guarded, and allows the quiet to fully surround him, not as something empty, but as something full in its own way. Full of what almost happened, full of what did not, full of the space that now exists because of a single decision that was never spoken out loud. Rex lowers his head again, resting it against the floor, but his body remains angled toward the door, the habit still there, the instinct still alive, even in rest. Ethan notices that too, and a faint, thoughtful expression crosses his face, not concern, not curiosity, but respect for something that does not fade when it is no longer needed. He glances once more toward the door, then back to Rex, and for a moment, he simply sits in that understanding, letting it settle into something that will not leave him. The night moves forward, minute by minute, quiet and steady, and inside that small space, nothing more needs to happen. No action, no words, just presence, just awareness, just the quiet truth that sometimes the most important thing in the world is not what you do, but what you choose not to do, and who stands beside you when that choice is made. Time moves, but gently, like it does not want to disturb what is already settled, and Ethan remains in the chair with a stillness that no longer feels like waiting, but like understanding taking root in quiet places. The light from the lamp has softened further, its glow steady and warm, turning the room into something almost removed from the rest of the world, a small space where nothing urgent exists and nothing demands to be solved. Rex breathes slowly at his feet, his presence constant, his body at rest but never absent, and Ethan's hand drifts down once more, resting lightly along the dog's back, as if confirming that what is here is real, solid, and not something that will disappear if he looks away. He does not think about the call anymore. He does not think about the men who came and left, or the thin line that once stretched across the doorway. Those things have already become part of the past, folded neatly into a place where they belong. What remains is quieter, simpler, the part that stays. Ethan leans his head back slightly, eyes half closing, not to sleep, but to listen, not with his ears, but with something deeper, something that has learned to recognize the absence of danger as clearly as its presence. The house responds in kind, offering only soft sounds, the faint settling of wood, the distant whisper of wind outside, the kind of stillness that feels earned rather than given. Rex shifts slightly, just enough to adjust his position, then settles. Again, his tail resting against the floor, his body angled in that same familiar way that keeps one eye on Ethan and one toward the door, a quiet balance between rest and readiness that never fades completely. Ethan notices the pattern again, and this time, he does not just observe it, he understands it. Not everything needs to be turned off to find peace. Some things remain, softened, reshaped, but still present in the background, steady and reliable. You never really stop, do you? Ethan murmurs quietly, not expecting an answer, not needing one. Rex's ears flick slightly, catching the tone, acknowledging the sound, and then stillness returns as if the moment has already said everything it needed to say. Ethan's gaze drifts toward the door once more, not out of habit, not out of concern, but out of something closer to respect, as if that simple piece of wood now represents more than just an entryway, more than just a boundary between inside and out. It represents a moment where everything could have changed and did not. A moment held in place by something that cannot be measured, only felt. He exhales slowly, letting the breath leave without holding on to it, and his shoulders settle deeper into the chair, his body finally at ease in a way that does not feel temporary. Rex remains exactly where he is, unmoving, steady, present, and in that quiet alignment, there is a kind of balance that does not need explanation. Outside, the night continues its slow passage, the darkness no longer heavy, no longer uncertain, just part of the world moving forward as it always does. And inside, Ethan sits with a calm that does not come from forgetting what almost happened, but from knowing it did not, and from understanding that sometimes, the difference between those two things is not strength, not skill, not even experience, but the quiet presence of something loyal enough to stand between you and a step you should never take, and patient enough to wait until you learn to listen. The stillness does not fade. It deepens, settling into something that feels less like silence and more like presence, as if the room itself is aware of what is past and chooses to hold it gently rather than let it disappear. Ethan remains in the chair, his posture loose, his breathing steady, and for the first time in a long while, there is nothing pulling at him, nothing demanding his attention beyond the quiet moment that exists right in front of him. Rex does not move from his place, but there is a subtle shift in him now, not in tension, not in alertness, but in something softer, something that comes only after purpose has been fulfilled and no longer needs to be carried forward. His head rests fully against the floor now, his eyes closing halfway, not in sleep, but in trust, the kind that allows rest without losing awareness completely. Ethan notices that change, and something in his expression softens in response, a quiet recognition that even the strongest instincts allow for peace when the moment has passed. He leans forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees again, and looks at Rex not as a partner in action, not as a trained companion, but simply as what he is in this moment, something loyal, something constant, something that chose to stay when it mattered most. "You can rest," Ethan says quietly, his voice low, almost a whisper, but steady in a way that carries certainty rather than suggestion. Rex's ears flick once at the sound, and his breathing deepens just slightly, as if the permission has been received and accepted without question. Ethan exhales slowly, a faint breath that carries something lighter than before, and leans back again, letting the chair support him fully this time, his shoulders no longer carrying anything that needs to be held up. The lamp continues to glow softly, its light unchanged, steady and warm, and the room feels complete in a way that does not need to be examined or understood. Outside, the wind brushes lightly against the walls again, quieter now, softer, as if even it has settled into the calm that has taken hold of everything around them. Ethan's gaze drifts once more toward the door, but this time it lingers there not out of habit, not out of reflection, but out of quiet acceptance. The door is just a door again. Not a question, not a risk, just a boundary that was respected when it needed to be. He nods slightly to himself, the motion small but certain, then lets his eyes close for a brief moment, not to sleep, but to feel the absence of urgency, the rare space where nothing needs to be done and nothing needs to be anticipated. Rex remains still, his presence unwavering even in rest, and in that shared quiet, something unspoken settles fully between them, something that will not fade when the night ends or when the memory of this moment begins to soften with time. It is not something that needs to be held onto tightly. It is something that will simply remain, part of the way they move forward from here, part of the way they understand the world, part of the way they trust each other without needing to question why. Ethan opens his eyes again slowly, the room unchanged, the calm still there, and he lets out one final, steady breath, not as release, not as relief, but as acknowledgement that sometimes the most important battles are the ones that never happen, the ones that are avoided in silence, the ones that leave no mark except the quiet knowledge that something unseen was recognized just in time, and that someone stood close enough to make sure it was not ignored. The night begins to loosen its hold on the world, not with a sudden change, but with a gradual softening that seeps through the edges of everything, and Ethan notices it without needing to look at a clock or a window. The air feels different, lighter, as if something unseen has shifted just enough to let the darkness breathe easier before it gives way. He remains in the chair, still and grounded, but there is a quiet awareness returning to him now, the kind that comes when the body recognizes that it has carried something long enough and can finally set it down. Rex does not stir much, but there is a subtle change in his breathing, deeper now, more settled, the kind of rest that comes only after purpose has been fulfilled and no longer needs to be held at the surface. Ethan glances down at him, studying the way the dog's body has relaxed without losing its shape, without losing that quiet readiness that seems woven into him, and something in Ethan's chest shifts again, not heavy, not sharp, just present. He leans forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, and lets his gaze drift toward the door once more, not out of concern, not out of habit, but out of recognition. That door will always be just a door again. But tonight gave it something else, a meaning that will not disappear, even when the memory softens with time. Ethan nods once, slowly, as if acknowledging that truth without needing to speak it aloud. "We almost missed it," he says quietly, the words not carrying regret, but awareness. Rex's ears flick slightly at the sound, but he does not lift his head, does not break his rest, and that alone feels like an answer. Ethan exhales slowly, letting the breath settle into something calm, something steady, and for a moment, he allows himself to sit in the space between what almost happened and what did not, without needing to define it further. Outside, the faintest hint of early light begins to touch the horizon, not enough to be seen clearly, but enough to be felt, a subtle shift in the way the darkness holds itself, a quiet promise that the night is nearing its end. Ethan notices it in the way the room feels, in the way the air moves, in the way everything seems just a little less still. Rex shifts slightly, just enough to adjust his position, and this time, he lets his eyes close fully, trusting the space, trusting the moment, trusting that whatever needed to be watched has already passed. Ethan watches that too, and something in his expression softens even further, a quiet acceptance settling into place where tension once lived. He leans back in the chair, shoulders relaxed, head resting against the worn fabric, and lets his eyes close for a brief moment, not to sleep, but to feel the calm without interruption. There is no urgency left, no question unanswered, just a quiet understanding that will stay long after this night fades into memory. He opens his eyes again slowly, the room unchanged, the calm still present, and his gaze settles once more on Rex, resting peacefully now, no longer holding the line, no longer standing between him and something unseen. Ethan lets out a soft breath, almost a whisper, and rests his hand gently against the dog's side, feeling the steady warmth, the steady life, the quiet presence that made all the difference. And in that moment, as the first trace of morning begins to approach without sound, Ethan understands something simple and unshakable, that sometimes the greatest protection does not come from knowing what lies ahead, but from trusting the one who refuses to let you walk into it alone. Morning arrives quietly, not with a sudden burst of light, but with a gradual unfolding that touches the edges of the room first, softening the shadows, easing the darkness into something gentle and familiar. Ethan notices it in the way the air feels, in the subtle shift of color along the walls, in the quiet way the world begins again without asking for attention. He remains in the chair, still and composed, but there is something different now, something lighter that rests beneath his calm, not replacing it, but settling alongside it as something earned. Rex sleeps fully now, his body relaxed in a way that only comes with complete trust, his breathing deep and steady, the quiet rise and fall of his chest matching the rhythm of a world that no longer holds tension in this moment. Ethan watches him for a while, not with urgency, not with thought, but with a kind of quiet gratitude that does not need to be spoken out loud. His hand rests gently against the dog's side, feeling the warmth there, the steady presence that stayed when it mattered, that refused to move, that chose to stand in the space between what was and what could have been. The house feels different in the morning light, not because anything has changed, but because something has been understood. The door remains closed, simple, ordinary, holding no weight beyond what it always was. But Ethan knows that what happened there will not leave him. Not as fear, not as a warning, but as something quieter. Something that will live in the way he pauses, in the way he listens, in the way he trusts what cannot always be explained. He leans forward slowly, resting his elbows on his knees, and lets out a soft breath that carries no tension, no uncertainty, just a quiet acknowledgement of the moment that has already passed. "We are still here," he says under his breath, the words steady, certain, not needing to be heard by anyone else. Rex does not wake, but his ear flicks slightly, catching the tone even in rest, responding in the only way he needs to, by simply remaining. Ethan allows himself a faint, almost invisible smile, not of relief, not of victory, but of understanding, the kind that does not demand to be held tightly. Because it is already part of him now. He stands slowly, stretching slightly as he rises, and the movement feels natural, unforced, like stepping into something that was waiting for him to arrive. The morning light grows a little stronger, slipping further into the room, touching the floor, the walls, the quiet space where everything has settled into place. Ethan glances once more toward the door, not out of habit, not out of concern, but as a final acknowledgement, a silent recognition of the line that was never crossed. Then he looks back to Rex, still resting, still steady, still there, and something in that simple presence feels larger than anything that could have happened on the other side of that door. He steps past him carefully, moving through the room with quiet purpose, not leaving the moment behind, but carrying it forward in a way that does not weigh him down. Rex stirs slightly as Ethan moves, lifting his head just enough to follow him with his eyes, calm, aware, present, and Ethan pauses for a brief second, meeting that gaze once more. No words are needed. They have already been spoken in silence. And as the morning continues to unfold around them, there is no sense of ending, no sense of closure, only a quiet continuation of something that does not need to be defined, a bond that does not need to be explained, and a truth that will remain long after this day becomes just another memory, that sometimes the smallest hesitation, guided by something loyal and unseen, is enough to change everything without making a sound.